Have you ever heard of ultra-processed foods? Hi, I'm Bernice Hunt, and I am a brain health specialist. I work with women just like you who are starting to notice a few memory challenges, and I help you to stay sharp so that as you age, you can still travel, have fun with your grandkids, and experience new adventures without missing a beat. As a public school teacher for over 30 years, I've done a lot of lessons about the 5 food groups. But I gotta tell you, I don't ever remember doing a lesson about processed foods. But times have sure changed because now there is definitely a focus on processed and unprocessed foods. Now, did you catch my video? A few days ago, I did a video on the worst brain foods, of which processed foods is definitely a part. So if you didn't see that video, check it out on my YouTube channel or my Facebook group, Keep Your Brain Sharp, and you'll take a look at that. But today I wanted to delve into the different categories that they now have for processed and unprocessed food. Now we're talking about unprocessed foods. We're talking about the whole food, the plant or the animal. You're directly eating that. And it's hardly been changed at all. It's hardly any alterations done to it. That is unprocessed food, the whole food with very little change to it, either the plant or the animal. Unprocessed foods, okay? Now, so we're talking about our whole grains, we're talking about our eggs, our nuts, our fruits and vegetables, our traditional pieces of poultry or meat or fish, those kind of things. Unprocessed foods. Now, processed foods, on the other hand, we're talking about foods that have been heated to an extremely high temperature. They have been altered in some way, have had added substances to them, and they still are recognized as food. Okay, so if they gave a scenario about that. So unprocessed example of an unprocessed food, let's say an apple. Okay, you pick the apple off the tree, it's whole, it's ripe, it's fresh, whatever, raw, it's an apple. That is an unprocessed food. Now, a processed version of that would be a packaged container of applesauce. They still foundationally have the apple as the base, what they started with, but they altered it, they heated it, they got an extreme temperature, they added preservatives or sugar or whatever they did to it, and they changed it around, but you still started out with an apple. Now, in between unprocessed and processed, there's something that's called culinary processing. And that is when you cook and add some seasonings and things to it. Okay, so with the apple example again, we take just eating the raw apple, the fresh apple, that's unprocessed. Culinary processing would be when you would take the apple and you would make homemade baked apples. So you put it in the oven, so you get some heat on it, you put some spices and things in it, so change the flavoring a little bit, and so you have altered a little bit, but minimally for the seasoning and the heat, it does change it a little bit, but not much. Then you have the process, like I said, the packaged applesauce. So those are examples. Now, processing is not always bad. We have processed foods that are processed by canning, by freezing, by fermentation, and even by a safety measure like pasteurization or for vacuum packaging, to keep them safe. Keep the bacteria and oxidation things out of them. So those are safeguards. And so that's a good thing for processed foods. So not all processed foods are necessarily bad, but you do have some that do have some adverse effects, and you don't want to be eating those all the time. We're talking about refining, either like refining the whole grains or refining the sugar. We're talking about the partially hydrogenated oils, where we get those trans fats from there. We don't want that. With the extreme overheating of that ends up being a bad thing. We have all the added sugars and added fat and added salts and other preservatives and artificial ingredients and flavorings and things like that. So that is another version of processed foods that we don't want to do a lot of, but it's become practically a norm in our society. A lot of us just think of that as food. We don't really stop and think that it's processed food when actually that is what it is. I remember when my Uncle Buddy was alive, and he told me long ago, and when I was little, he would tell me that he does not eat fast food hamburgers. And he said why he doesn't do that is because he said, I love hamburgers, but I go home, I make my own hamburgers in my kitchen. I make my hamburger patty. He said, because when I make a hamburger patty in my kitchen and I make my hamburger either with the bun or the bread or whatever, and I bite into it, the hamburger starts falling apart. It crumbles, it falls apart as I'm eating. It's delicious, but it's falling apart. He says, when I look at the fast food hamburger patties, they don't fall apart. They stay totally intact, the same shape. You eat it and eat it, eat it, and you still get that round patty. It does not change. He said there is something wrong with that picture. What did they do to that hamburger to where it's now compact and it does not fall apart? So he says that's not a good thing. So he refused to eat fast food burgers. I remember I was an adult with grown children before I made my first dish of homemade cranberry sauce because it never occurred to me that I could. I thought cranberry sauce came from the store. I know how they made it, whatever. I know it was cranberries. I know but I didn't know that I could actually make it and I could control the sugar that went into it. It was just the food. That's how it came in the can. Cranberry sauce. That's my naivety, but that's how I was. So I understand. Last year, I was in a classroom with the Tower Garden and harvesting the plants that the kids were doing. And one of the third graders, when I came in, I said, we're going to make salad. We're going to have a salad bar. We're going to make salad from our Tower Garden plants. He looked at me and he said, we're going to eat those plants? And I said, yeah, that's the purpose of growing them. It never occurred to him that you would actually eat what we were growing. He thought it was just decoration or whatever, or a science project or whatever, but he just hadn't made that step because we are so accustomed to eating processed foods, okay? And we could go on and on with those stories, but you get my gist, okay? So there was a study, in fact, that said more than 60% of U.S. calories come from ultra-processed foods. And we'll talk about what that is in just a minute. Ultra-processed foods. And another study that I saw said there was 73%. When they did their study, they took 50,000 different brands of food and they came up with there is 73% of the foods that Americans eat are ultra-processed foods. So now we talked about processed foods. So you can imagine what ultra-processed foods, that's the next step. That's the higher level. Okay, we'll talk about what that is because it is not a good thing. So we talked about that raw apple, unprocessed. We talked about the culinary processing when you cook it in your oven and you add the spices in it, so you change it a little bit, alter it a little bit, but it's still recognizable as food. It came from the apple. That is culinary. Processed foods would be taking that apple and putting it under extreme heat and adding the sugar and stuff and adding the preservatives it needs for the long shelf life, packaging it in the little container, putting it on the shelf, buying from the store. That has now become a processed food, still recognizable as an apple and still actually came from the apple. Okay, so now we're going to talk about ultra processed foods. Okay, processed foods start with the actual food. Ultra-processed foods start with what they call, and I quote, industrialized formulations. They start with industrialized formulations. Okay, we're talking about a formula. They take a formula, and that formula consists of, they said, extracted substances from various foods. They don't use the food. They extract whatever they want out of that food. And then they create in their lab, synthesized, man-made stuff to make it hyper-palatable, to make it appealing to us, right? To taste better, to look better, the texture in our mouth to feel better, so we can chew it easier or whatever it is. Okay. Addictive things like the sugar, the fat, the salt. Also, they have things in it they put in to make it highly palatable or appealing to us. They put it in with the extractions that they get from these different foods and with the man-made other additives they put in there, and then they heat it to a high temperature, get it to come into some kind of form, gel it or dough it or whatever they do, and then they do what they call extrusion, which is a molding or shaping. They squeeze it into whatever form they want it to be. So with this ultra processing, it may not even be, there might even not even be the food they say it is, that they didn't start with the food they say it is. For example, with our same apple, we have the fresh apple as unprocessed. We have the homemade baked apples as the culinary processing. We have the packaged, prepackaged applesauce in the container on the shelf at the store as the processed apple sauce. Take that into ultra processing, you would have something maybe like apple puffs, a snack, okay? It's called apple puffs because it has the flavoring and maybe even this kind of this, seems like the texture of apples, but it doesn't even have to have any apple in it, not real apple. It's an industrialized formulation that has become appealing to us because they know how much sugar and salt and fat to put in it. They know how much flavoring to put in it. They know the size. They know the texture to make it our mouth want more, but they know how to make it addictive to us. And they call it apple because it does have substances similar to apple in it, but they never started with an apple. Guys, is that food? Is that food? And what is our body and our brain going to do when they get that? And they say that 60 to 73% of the foods that we are eating are ultra processing. They were giving some examples of what kind of things. And they had ice cream. You know, ice cream can be all kind of different flavors. I remember years ago when my mom asked to go get her some ice cream, and I hadn't bought ice cream in the store in a while, and went down the aisle. I was amazed at all the different flavorings. I mean, I grew up with what? Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, chocolate chip, pistachio, a few other ones maybe, but they had the whole butter gum, bubble gum, and this and that and that and that and cookie dough, and what I was just like, whoa. Now, do you think they really had any cookie dough in that ice cream? No. Think they have bubble gum in that ice cream? No. Okay, those are ultra processed types of food. So you have ice cream, candy. They talked about noodles. They talked about chips. Okay, just for some of there's a lot of other different things. And there's a website that I went to. It's called truefood.tech, T-E-C-H, truefood.tech. And it is a database of over 50,000 brands so far, maybe more now, of foods that they are testing specifically to see how much processing, the level of processing that's in that brand of food, okay? And like I said, they want to see if it's processed or ultra processed or whatever. Probably not going to be culinary because it's on the shelf. But anyway, ultra processed. They have a score from 1 to 100 when they rate it. I went on there and I just, put in a couple of things. I did salsa and for a couple of brands. I was shocked at the spread of different brands of just salsa. Now, salsa you can make at home, number one. Number two, I'm thinking it's going to be a lot of fresh stuff, so it's not going to be that many preservatives, but some of the salsa scores were pretty good, a 3 or a 7 or something, but some of them were like in the 40s, 70s, a lot of artificial stuff, a lot of overheating, a lot of trans fats or whatever was in it. I don't know exactly. You could go through and look and see everything they were saying that was in it. A lot of names I couldn't pronounce, that kind of stuff. But it depends on not just the food, but the brand. I even looked up coconut water. How different can coconut water be? Was I shocked? I was shocked at the spread of numbers depending on what brand. So that's a good website to go to, truefood.tech, T-E-C-H. Okay, and you can go through that. But anyway, I was really shocked at that. So you have the ultra processing that, in my opinion, is not food, that we're giving to a lot of our family members, our parents, our children. We need to really take a look at that because it is affecting our health. They're doing a lot of studies on it, and they say what they do know so far is they know that weight gain is one of the results of eating a lot of ultra processed foods, and excessive eating, because they put things that are palatable, things that you're going to want to eat. You're going to want to eat it. And because it's not a lot of, actually nutrients in it, your body's going to keep searching and asking for nutrients. So you're going to be eating more. So it's excessive eating, addictive eating, and weight gain, which is not two things that are not good for your brain. Okay. And then speaking of your brain is not food. It's like if you're, you have a wig, so you're wearing a wig, you wear it every day, and it looks like hair, it feels like hair, you can style it all up into hair, okay, it's your wig, but is that wig gonna get longer? Is your wig gonna grow? No, because it is not attached to any live follicles, so it is not gonna grow. That's like giving yourself this stuff that looks like food, tastes like food, feels like food, is on the shelf as if it's food. Is it nurturing your brain? If it's not food, once again, that answer is going to be no. And I'm sure it's also doing some detrimental things to it, because when your immune system doesn't recognize food, it starts up. It does something to combat against what it thinks the invader is. Okay, so we won't get all into that. But my point is, we have to do better. If you don't know to do better, you're not going to do better. So just know that there is processed foods and there is ultra processed foods, and there is a big difference. Okay, so speaking of doing better, I want to let you know that my Tower Garden Facebook party, today is day 5, so today is officially the last day, but the posts are going to be up for a few days, so if you haven't had a chance to go on, or if you went on a couple of days, you didn't go on all the days, you can still go on my Keep Your Brain Sharp community group page, and I'll put the link in the comment, Keep Your Brain Sharp community group page on Facebook, and you can see and hear all about the Tower Garden. I have videos up there, how-to things to do, a lot of information about the Tower Garden. And tomorrow, Saturday, I'm going to have my Zoom drawing. So if you comment on the post, your name's going to go into a raffle wheel. And tomorrow we're going to be wrapping that off. Don't have to be present to win, but I do have the Zoom information in the Facebook group as well. So you can come and ask questions about the Tower Garden and just see who wins or whatever. I'm going to post that in the Facebook group on Monday, so you'll be able to see who the winners are. You want to be a winner if you're interested about your brains. I got some good brain prizes for winners. Okay, so check that out, and remember that your brain's destiny is in your hands.